When United States Navy sensors flagged unusual cargo activity in the Caribbean, what looked like a routine check spiraled into one of the biggest joint operations in recent memory.
Today, making history as the Coast Guard announcing the largest drug offload in history.
A single tip traced back to Colombia unraveled a $5 billion cartel machine stretching across ports, cargo ships, and offshore accounts worldwide.
Colombia is still the #1 producer of cocaine in the world. From here, hundreds of tons of cocaine are moved every year, quietly mixed with legal goods inside containers.
Hidden aboard those vessels were massive meth shipments and encrypted data tying the entire network to powerful international money players. Operation Silent Harbor, inside the cartel that built a drug empire like a corporation. The war between United States forces and the drug cartels has never been about brute strength. It's been an endless chess match, move, counter-move, adaptation after adaptation, played out across oceans, borders, and balance sheets. And sometimes the board lights up in unexpected places. Just before dawn on the outskirts of Envigado, Colombia, a quiet industrial zone flickered to life on United States naval intelligence screens, not with gunfire or sirens, but with electricity. A power surge, abnormal, rhythmic, and far stronger than anything a truck repair shop should need, pulsed steadily from a single warehouse. Strong enough, in fact, to rival the draw of a small shipyard. Within minutes, the anomaly was flagged and pushed through the interagency network, landing simultaneously at an FBI field office in Bogotá, the Colombian National Police, and the Naval Intelligence Fusion Center in Key West.
Some type of rectangles that are actually darker than the surrounding area.
Whatever was happening inside that garage, it wasn't mechanical work. For nearly 3 months, joint analysts had been tracking a trail that refused to make sense in isolation. Trucks moving between Medellin and the Caribbean with blank or incomplete manifests. Shell companies appeared overnight, routing funds through Panama, Curacao, and Hong Kong before vanishing just as cleanly. Short bursts of encrypted radio traffic lighting up near the Venezuelan border, then going dark again. Each piece alone was forgettable. Together, they pointed to a cartel operation hiding behind the clean mask of legitimate industry. Now the pattern had collapsed inward. Envigado, once synonymous with Pablo Escobar's empire, was back in focus. But this wasn't nostalgia or recycled chaos. What investigators were seeing felt different. It's more polished, more disciplined, and with an unusual corporation that's not often associated with the cartel. Intelligence suggested the site was controlled by the Clan del Golfo, operating in coordination with Venezuela's Tren de Aragua. Two powerful organizations increasingly intertwined across borders. Together, they were believed to be running a cross-border network worth billions. If the power signal was real, this wasn't just another drug lab. It was a doorway into an industrial-scale syndicate. By midnight, suspicion hardened into near certainty. The modest building labeled as a truck repair facility wasn't a garage in any conventional sense. High-resolution satellite passes, thermal imagery, and hours of drone loitering revealed a footprint that didn't match light mechanical work. Instead, the structure radiated steady heat cycles through the night, a signature consistent with continuous chemical processing hidden beneath cracked concrete floors. When investigators later breached the site, the scale stunned even seasoned agents. 5 stainless steel chemical reactors, each roughly the size of a compact car, were embedded into a web of pumps, condensers, and automated control panels. This wasn't improvised chemistry. It was precision manufacturing. Running at capacity, the setup could produce more than 2,000 pounds of crystal meth per reactor each week. The purity levels told the rest of the story. Lab samples tested at 99.3%, near pharmaceutical grade. This wasn't street-level production anymore. It was industrial output. While tactical teams mapped the physical space, financial and cyber units were building the invisible half of the operation. Bank records revealed millions flowing through shell entities registered across multiple jurisdictions, each transfer spaced and structured to mimic legitimate logistics payments. Equipment procurement, transportation services, maintenance contracts. On paper, it looked like a boring industrial supply chain. In reality, it was laundering drug revenue at scale. For months, cyber teams had been untangling those sanitized trails, while signals intelligence filled in the movement on the ground. Ghost trucks with cloned plates, transponders disabled near dead drops, warehouses that appeared on camera only once or twice, then went silent. Power spikes across Colombia's manufacturing belt that lined up perfectly with nighttime processing windows. Slowly, the picture sharpened. Physical surveillance confirmed the deception ran deep. Colombian Air Force drones flying low enough to avoid detection revealed deliberate engineering choices designed to hide scale and sustain non-stop production. Electric meters feeding the compound had been digitally altered to underreport usage, masking massive kilowatt-hour draws from utility monitors. Exhaust systems that should have vented through stacks were rerouted into false ducts disguised as truck exhaust pipes, pushing chemical byproducts into municipal sewer lines and nearby waterways instead of the open air. Then there was the tunnel. Carved from the rear wall of the compound, it ran to an abandoned boat dock along a minor tributary, an invisible loading point meant for nighttime transfers. Sealed barrels could be rolled straight from lab to speedboat without ever touching a port. No manifests, no cameras, just dark water and open sea. Between October 8th and 10th, the intelligence flow tightened like a noose. Satellites tracked a convoy of box trucks leaving Envigado and heading north toward a remote port outside Barranquilla. A GPS tracker, quietly planted weeks earlier, blinked alive near the shoreline, confirming what analysts feared. Roughly 4,000 pounds of methamphetamine base was being staged for maritime transfer. When analysts ran the numbers, the case detonated into a different category entirely. Based on purity and distribution patterns, each shipment carried a conservative United States retail value near $200 million. With a 3-week rotation cycle, the network's transportation backbone could move close to 10,000 kilograms annually. This wasn't just an illegal profit, it was an economic force capable of distorting markets and funding parallel systems of power. Inside the Joint Command Center, urgency replaced routine. Drone feeds, intercepted radio traffic, financial dashboards, and satellite overlays fused into a single operational picture. Intelligence officers compared projected cartel revenues to the export earnings of small nations to convey the stakes. That framing changed everything. What began as a law enforcement operation now required military precision. The cartel had built chemistry, logistics, and finance into a self-sustaining machine. Partial disruption wouldn't be enough, but speed came with risk. Breaching a live chemical facility raised the possibility of catastrophic releases. A punctured reactor or ignited solvent could turn the compound into a firestorm. Forced labor victims inside added another layer of urgency. Commanders had to balance surprise with containment, aggression with control. And the cartel had planned for this too. False walls, sabotaged suppression systems, multiple escape routes designed to fracture response teams under pressure. The compound wasn't just hidden, it was fortified against intervention. The decision point was brutally simple. Act now and stop more than 2 tons of near-pure meth from reaching global markets. Or hesitate and let it vanish into the supply chain before sunrise. The clock pressed down on every screen in the room. As satellite passes narrowed and radios fell silent, the final brief moved through the chain of command. Synchronize the breach, secure evidence, extract any victims, exploit every digital device to follow on targets. No one could predict how violently the site would resist, or how one stray round in a chemically charged environment could turn a precision raid into an inferno. The analysts agreed on one thing: the next phase would not be quiet. Operation Silent Harbor moved from planning to action just after midnight on October 11th at 1:30 a.m. A 3-axis task force slipped into position, and the chessboard tilted violently toward its endgame. The high seas havoc on a $5 billion meth flow. The night air hung thick with tension as an FBI hostage rescue team flanked the compound. Colombian special operations units fanned out on the southern approach, and United States Navy observers tracked every shadow from maritime patrol assets and coastal radars. Command and control was a living organism, pulsing with real-time feeds from drones, intercepted signals, and the lab of analysts in Bogotá, all synchronized to a single relentless countdown. The mission was surgical: breach the facility, secure the evidence, and stop the outbound convoy before those 4,000 pounds of meth ever touched the sea. At 1:30 a.m., a breach charge detonated, steel doors screamed open, and operators surged forward. Night vision turned the garage into a moving lattice of shadows, chemical drums glinting under emergency lights, masked figures scattering in panic. Within seconds, chaos hardened into firefight, adrenaline and training colliding in every movement. Small rooms designed for processing chemicals became killing zones, and the air thickened with acrid smoke from burning solvents and ruptured seals. One errant round pierced a stainless steel reactor beneath the floor, sending vapors alight. Plastic piping ruptured and flames raced through containment channels never meant for open fire. Operators backed off to establish a secure perimeter as hazmat teams in rebreathers braced for entry. The cartel's fire suppression systems, either inadequate or deliberately sabotaged, turned the environment into a lethal obstacle course. Yet despite the blaze, the raid hit its primary targets. 15 cartel gunmen were neutralized, many revealed as combat-hardened veterans hiding behind false walls and scorched concrete. Investigators uncovered crystal meth so pure and abundant that forensic labs had to be brought in to avoid contamination. Over 6,000 pounds of near-pharmaceutical-grade methamphetamine were seized, representing tens of millions of retail doses and a devastating disruption to the cartel's supply chain. The human toll was staggering. 5 workers were found chained in a rear vault, suffering burns and chemical injuries from prolonged exposure to caustic reagents and solvents. Medical teams administered emergency care as investigators began rapid victim interviews, uncovering critical leads linking the Envigado facility to similar installations across Colombia. Despite the fire's destruction, forensic teams cataloged reactors, condenser arrays, and improvised distillation columns, revealing industrial-level engineering rather than backyard chemistry. Financial analysts sifted through seized devices while cyber teams raced to recover GPS traces and intercepted logs to map the cartel's shipping schedules and command nodes, racing against corrupted or heat-damaged evidence. By dawn, the compound was a smoldering husk, but the intelligence harvested was invaluable. The raid had halted a shipment, dismantled a critical node, and exposed the cartel's maritime timetable. Encrypted chatter hinted at the next move: freighters idling 35 nautical miles off Venezuela's Paria Gulf. Coordinates extracted from a confiscated satellite phone revealed 2 vessels, the San Miguel and Corazon del Sur, registered under shell companies in Curaçao and Hong Kong. United States Naval Intelligence confirmed the pattern. This was the next link in the $5 billion network, the convoy preparing to offload narcotics to fast boats bound for the Lesser Antilles. From above, an MH-60R Seahawk cut through the darkness, sensors tracking heat signatures across rolling seas. 3 radar blips moved in formation below, small, fast, and heavily armed. The calm shattered at 19 minutes past 3 in the morning, when tracer rounds arced past the helicopter. Cartel escort boats had fired first, heavy machine guns mounted on modified fishing vessels. The pilot banked hard, returning fire with the GAU 21.50 caliber, shredding one speedboat in seconds, flames reflecting off waves, turning the sea into a patchwork of fire and smoke. Over comms, a United States Navy destroyer 20 nautical miles away authorized RIB assault teams to advance. Within minutes, 2 rigid-hull inflatables carrying 12 operators each roared across the surf toward the freighter. The staccato of rotor blades mixed with gunfire as boarding teams closed in. Cartel fighters were disciplined, returning fire with rifles and grenade launchers, forcing the first RIB to break formation. Naval gunners in the Seahawk unleashed suppressive fire, tearing through upper-deck railings, allowing assault teams to climb ladders under a storm of bullets. The clash lasted barely 8 minutes, close-quarters combat across narrow, fuel-slick gangways. By 3:28 a.m., resistance collapsed. 17 cartel operatives were captured alive, many wounded, and the sea was momentarily quiet again. Silent Harbor. Below deck, agents uncovered 2,100 pounds of methamphetamine stashed in sealed drums cleverly labeled as industrial solvents. Another 1,900 pounds hidden inside floating tanks the crew had attempted to dump overboard. The combined street value topped $350 million, a staggering figure that barely captured the scale of the operation. The freighter's holds contained coded manifests, radio equipment, and encrypted hard drives identical to those seized in Envigado. A clear sign that the maritime operation and the inland superlab were two cogs in the same colossal machine. As dawn crept over the Caribbean, the scale of the seizure became undeniable. False bulkheads, reinforced compartments, and meticulously hidden cargo indicated that these ships had run dozens of identical shipments before. Intelligence revealed a rigid 3-week shipping cycle connecting ports in Venezuela, Panama, and Trinidad. Each voyage cloaked in falsified agricultural trade documents and customs stamps forged via hacked servers. Navy divers scoured the surrounding waters and found more floating containers, buoyant and sealed, their contents confirmed as high-purity meth, each barrel representing millions of dollars in profit. Yet together they were a symbol of something more. An industrialized narcotics economy operating on the same sea lanes as legitimate commerce. The success of the operation sent ripples through command channels. Within hours, the task force secured the vessels and towed them to a naval pier in Curaçao, while intelligence officers began the painstaking work of cataloging onboard electronics. Inside those encrypted drives lay the financial arteries of a $5 billion network, waiting to be unraveled. This was more than a drug bust. It was modern maritime warfare against a ruthless, highly organized adversary, one that traded missiles for cargo manifests but operated with equal precision and intent. As the sun rose, casting a golden shimmer over the water, smoke still drifted from the remnants of a burning speedboat, a grim reminder that the sea itself had become a battlefield. Would the data aboard the San Miguel expose the full scope of the empire? The answer lay in the encrypted drives now en route to the FBI lab in Quantico. By October 12th, the Caribbean operation had shifted from combat to analysis. At a secure hangar in Curaçao, FBI digital forensics teams worked through the night, surrounded by confiscated hard drives, encrypted tablets, and maritime logs recovered from the freighters. The data extracted from the San Miguel alone reached 2.4 terabytes, containing financial ledgers, GPS patterns, and coded messages written in layered encryption designed for offshore banking. Piece by piece, the structure of a hidden empire came into focus. Investigators soon uncovered 51 offshore accounts and 7 shell corporations routing funds through Panama, Curaçao, and Hong Kong, all linked directly to a logistics front in Venezuela, traced back to the Clan Dello and Trendaragua. Analysts realized the two syndicates were not merely partners. They were co-founders of a multinational narcotics consortium, structured like a corporate alliance. Each quarter, they exported up to 20,000 pounds of meth, over 100 million doses circulating every 3 months across the Americas. Cross-referencing shipment manifests with intercepted emails revealed the industrial reach of the operation. The Envigado Superlab was just one of 4 identical facilities in Colombia and Venezuela, each capable of generating nearly $400 million per month, feeding a combined annual revenue estimated at $5 billion, equivalent to the GDP of some small nations. Unlike older, chaotic cartels, this alliance functioned like a legitimate enterprise, with accountants, chemists, and logistics managers replacing soldiers, yet enforced by the same ruthless paramilitary networks. At Quantico, intelligence briefings framed Silent Harbor as a blueprint for a new kind of warfare, a hybrid battle fought simultaneously on land, sea, and cyberspace. Coordination between the FBI, United States Navy, and Colombian Special Forces showed how military precision could dismantle organized crime when traditional policing alone proved insufficient. Yet behind every success lay a sobering realization. This was not the end of the war. Modern cartels no longer hide in jungles or alleys. They operate through digital ledgers, encrypted shipping networks, and logistics firms that blur the line between commerce and crime. Money laundering has been industrialized. The frontier between legal trade and narcotics has all but vanished. Cleanup teams in Colombia sealed the burned remnants of the Envigado facility, confirming that Operation Silent Harbor had dismantled an entire production network, destroyed 4 major laboratories, seized over 10,000 pounds of meth, and captured dozens of senior cartel operatives. Yet the recovered data hinted at something larger: a shadow economy spanning 3 continents, quietly shaping political influence, port ownership, and global trade routes. Silent Harbor was not just a victory, it was a warning. The next generation of cartels no longer relies solely on street wars or smuggling tunnels. They build industries. Their weapons are encryption, finance, and technology. And while the ocean may have swallowed their fleet, the blueprint for globalized crime remains afloat in the digital sea. If a $5 billion empire can operate with the sophistication of a tech company, what does that mean for the future of national security? While vigilance continues for the next operation, the lessons of Silent Harbor are clear. The fight has moved from the jungles and streets to servers, shipping lanes, and encrypted drives, and the stakes are higher than ever. Sea Shadows: America's maritime war on the cocaine trail. The ocean does not give up its secrets easily. At night, the Caribbean looks endless and innocent, a black sheet of water stitched with moonlight. But beneath that calm surface runs one of the most lucrative criminal highways on Earth. This is where the modern drug war unfolds, not in alleys or border fences, but far offshore, where the horizon swallows ships whole and jurisdiction blurs into open water. Long before a smuggler ever sees land, the hunt has already begun. High above the sea, surveillance aircraft trace slow arcs through the darkness while satellites quietly log every anomaly below. A boat running too fast, a freighter drifting where it shouldn't, a radar return that flickers and disappears. These are the clues. Most nights nothing comes of them. But sometimes, one small irregularity sets off a chain reaction that pulls together navies, coast guards, intelligence analysts, and international partners into a single, coordinated pursuit. What follows is rarely one dramatic moment. Instead, it's weeks of patience, sudden bursts of violence against the waves, and tense confrontations played out under harsh lights on pitching decks. In recent years, the United States Coast Guard has become the tip of the spear in this offshore struggle, operating far beyond coastal waters alongside the United States Navy and allied forces. Their cutters roam thousands of miles from home, guided by intelligence from Joint Interagency Task Force South, where analysts stitch together radar feeds, human intelligence, and satellite imagery into a constantly shifting picture of maritime traffic. The smugglers know they're being watched, but the ocean gives them confidence. It's vast, forgiving, and full of hiding places. They rely on speed, weather, and sheer distance to keep their cargo moving. Sometimes they use go-fast boats, low, narrow vessels that skim the water at terrifying speeds, loaded with fuel drums and tightly wrapped bales. Other times they turn to semi-submersibles, crude machines designed to ride just below the surface, leaving only a cockpit and exhaust pipe visible above the waves. These crafts are built to be disposable. If intercepted, crews are trained to scuttle them, sending evidence straight to the seafloor. The drugs matter less than the route. The system survives as long as the pathway remains open. When a cutter finally closes in, there's nothing cinematic about the first moments. Engines roar. Salt spray stings exposed skin. Helicopters drop low, their rotors flattening the sea, firing warning shots across a fleeing vessel's bow. Boarding teams launch rigid hull inflatable boats and race through swells that slam into their chests like blunt force. Every approach is dangerous. Smugglers have been known to ram law enforcement craft or dump fuel and drugs overboard in desperation. One wrong move, one misjudged wave, and the sea takes its payment. In operation after operation, These confrontations have quietly stacked into record-breaking results. Over the course of coordinated patrols across the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific, United States and partner forces have intercepted dozens of smuggling vessels, seizing tens of thousands of pounds of cocaine destined for international markets. When those drugs are finally offloaded at port, the scale becomes impossible to ignore. Bales wrapped in plastic and netting are stacked shoulder-high along docks, stretching farther than the eye can follow. Each package represents not just profit denied, but countless downstream crimes that will never happen. Naval destroyers have increasingly become part of this fight, not as blunt instruments of war, but as platforms of speed, reach, and persistence. With Coast Guard law enforcement detachments embarked aboard, these warships extend maritime policing deep into international waters. A destroyer's radar can spot a suspect vessel long before it knows it's being watched, and its helicopter can close distances that smugglers once believed were safe. When boarding teams step onto a suspect deck, they bring with them not just weapons and authority, but a global legal framework that allows traffickers to be detained and prosecuted far from any national shoreline. The seizures themselves often sound clinical when reduced to statistics. Hundreds of pounds here, thousands there. But the reality is visceral. Cocaine soaked with seawater, fuel-stained decks, exhausted crews sitting under guard as dawn breaks over the horizon. Many smugglers are not kingpins or masterminds. They are paid a fraction of the cargo's value, promised quick money in exchange for risking prison or death at sea. When arrested, some stare silently at the water, others talk too much, their bravado collapsing once the chase is over. The real architects of the trade are nowhere near the vessels. They exist in spreadsheets, shell companies, and bank transfers that ripple outward across borders. International cooperation has become the defining feature of modern maritime interdiction. Canadian warships patrol alongside American cutters. European partners share intelligence. Latin American navies work to choke routes closer to shore. No single nation can police the ocean alone, and traffickers exploit every seam between legal systems. That's why these operations rely as much on diplomacy and agreements as they do on ships and aircraft. A boarding conducted hundreds of miles offshore may involve permissions and legal handoffs spanning multiple countries, all decided in real time while waves crash against steel hulls. The Eastern Pacific has emerged as one of the most active fronts in this conflict, its vast distances offering traffickers both opportunity and peril. Here, interdictions often unfold under a punishing sun, where heat bakes the deck and exhaustion sets in long before contact is made. Helicopters lift off repeatedly, scanning empty water until a single dark speck appears where it shouldn't. When intercepted, vessels are often overloaded, riding dangerously low, their crews knowing that speed is their only hope. It rarely is. Even as seizures mount, authorities acknowledge a hard truth. Interdiction alone cannot end the drug trade. For every shipment stopped, others slip through. The goal is disruption, forcing traffickers to change routes, lose money, abandon vessels, and operate under constant pressure. Every interception raises costs and risk, slowly eroding the efficiency of the networks that depend on predictability and scale. It's a war of attrition played out on saltwater. Occasionally, these operations intersect with broader geopolitical debates, especially when aggressive tactics or military assets are used in law enforcement roles. Critics question escalation, while supporters point to the sheer volume of narcotics removed from circulation. What remains consistent is the tempo. Patrols do not stop. The sea does not rest. Somewhere, right now, a cutter is altering course based on a new lead, a helicopter crew is strapping in, and a smuggling vessel is pushing its engines hard, hoping tonight is the night no one is watching. By the time seized drugs are stacked on a pier and photographed for release, the story feels finished. In reality, it's only a pause. The ocean absorbs the noise and moves on, indifferent to victories and losses alike. But for the men and women who patrol its surface, each interdiction is a tangible moment where the balance briefly shifts. Out there, between sky and water, law and lawlessness collide in silence and spray, and the outcome is decided not in headlines, but in endurance. The modern maritime drug war is not defined by a single massive bust or dramatic revelation. It is defined by persistence, by countless small decisions made in the dark, by ships that turn toward trouble instead of away from it, and by an understanding that the fight is measured not in final victories, but in constant pressure applied across an unforgiving expanse of sea. As long as those roots exist, the watch never ends. With the military now on constant alert to the cartel's shifting tactics, it's time to look at how their smuggling game has evolved, and the lengths they'll go to stay ahead. From fruit crates to submersibles, the evolution of cartel smuggling. If the sea is the battlefield, then adaptation is the cartel's greatest weapon. Every seizure teaches them something. Every interdiction exposes a weakness. And over decades, that feedback loop has transformed smuggling from an act of desperation into a cold, methodical science. What began as crude concealment has evolved into an ecosystem of deception, logistics, engineering, and technology that rivals legitimate global supply chains. The drugs themselves barely change. The methods never stop changing. In the early days, concealment was almost innocent in its simplicity. Cocaine and marijuana were hidden where customs officers least expected to look. Inside crates of bananas, buried beneath sacks of coffee beans, dissolved into liquids and soaked into clothing, packed into the hollow cores of pineapples, or sealed inside waxed fruit shipments that moved too fast and spoiled too easily to invite inspection. Entire shipping containers left ports labeled as produce, their paperwork clean, their contents anything but. A single container of fruit could hide hundreds of kilograms, blending seamlessly into the rhythm of global trade. Ports were overwhelmed, inspectors understaffed, and the sheer volume of legitimate commerce provided perfect cover. For a time, it worked frighteningly well. When authorities adapted, deploying sniffer dogs, X-ray scanners, chemical testing, the cartels adjusted again. They learned to think vertically instead of horizontally. If ports were watched, go under them. If borders were sealed, go beneath them. That was how the tunnel era began, not as isolated curiosities, but as long-term infrastructure projects that blurred the line between criminal enterprise and civil engineering. Beneath deserts and cities, under rivers and walls, cartels carved corridors reinforced with steel, ventilated with industrial fans, lit with electric wiring, and sometimes even fitted with rail systems to move loads quickly and quietly.
U.S. authorities discovered a drug tunnel between San Diego and Tijuana. The tunnel, the length of 6 football fields.
These were not holes in the ground. They were underground highways, built over months or years, financed by profits that made the risk seem trivial. Some tunnels stretched for hundreds of meters, others for miles, emerging inside warehouses, homes, or nondescript buildings that hid their true purpose behind peeling paint and false walls. When one was discovered, it made headlines. What rarely made headlines was how many others remained hidden, or how quickly replacements were already under construction. For cartels, tunnels weren't clever tricks. They were investments. At the same time, maritime smuggling evolved in parallel. Fishing boats became cargo vessels became decoys. Drugs were no longer just hidden aboard ships, they were externalized. Bales fitted with GPS trackers were dropped into the ocean at prearranged coordinates, bobbing just beneath the surface, waiting to be retrieved by smaller boats hours or days later. This reduced risk for larger vessels and fractured responsibility across multiple crews, each knowing only their part of the route. If one team was caught, the rest of the chain survived intact. Then came the semi-submersibles, the most iconic symbol of cartel innovation at sea. These were not true submarines at first, but low-profile vessels designed to sit just above the waterline, nearly invisible to radar and impossible to spot at night without precise intelligence. Built deep in jungle shipyards, hauled piece by piece through rivers and mangroves, they represented a shift in mindset. Smugglers were no longer hiding from detection, they were actively engineering around it. Over time, these craft became more advanced, with longer ranges, improved stability, and increased payloads. Some were capable of crossing entire oceans. Many were designed to be sunk at the first sign of interception, their crews escaping while the evidence vanished beneath thousands of feet of water. As law enforcement pushed back with aircraft, drones, and satellites, cartels responded with technology of their own. GPS navigation replaced dead reckoning. Satellite phones ensured constant communication. Encrypted messaging apps allowed coordinators to adjust routes in real time, reacting to patrol patterns and weather conditions faster than ever before. In some cases, smugglers monitored social media and shipping data as closely as authorities did, studying open-source intelligence to anticipate where pressure would be applied next. Even the drugs themselves began to change form. Cocaine was compressed into denser bricks to reduce volume. Liquid cocaine was chemically bonded into plastics, fuels, and industrial materials, only to be extracted later in clandestine labs. Methamphetamine was dissolved, transported as slurry, or hidden within legitimate chemical shipments that required expert knowledge to inspect properly. These were not impulsive decisions. They were the result of chemists, logisticians, and accountants working together, refining methods through trial, error, and loss. Air routes followed a similar pattern of escalation. Small planes flew low to avoid radar, landing on dirt strips carved into jungles or deserts. When airspace tightened, drones entered the equation. At first, they carried small loads across short distances, border crossings, prison walls, remote coastlines. Then came larger unmanned aircraft, capable of hauling significant quantities autonomously, programmed to fly preset routes and crash land if intercepted. Losing a drone was cheaper than losing a pilot. Technology shifted the calculus. On land, concealment became psychological as much as physical. Drugs were hidden in places designed to exploit human assumptions. Inside religious statues, medical equipment, construction materials, even children's toys. Entire trucks were modified with hydraulic compartments that could only be opened through precise sequences of actions, designed to defeat casual inspections. Smugglers learned that complexity itself was a defense. The longer it took to search, the less likely a search would happen at all. Financial smuggling evolved alongside physical transport. Money no longer needed to cross borders in cash-filled suitcases. Profits moved through cryptocurrency, shell companies, trade-based money laundering schemes, and manipulated invoices that made illicit funds appear as legitimate business transactions. Drugs moved one way, paperwork moved the other. In many cases, the financial trail was harder to follow than the shipment itself, buried beneath layers of legitimate commerce and legal ambiguity. What makes this evolution especially dangerous is not any single tactic, but the speed at which tactics are abandoned and replaced. Cartels do not cling to tradition. They treat methods as disposable tools, used until compromised, then discarded without sentiment. The tunnel discovered today will be obsolete tomorrow. A route shut down becomes bait to draw attention away from a new one opening elsewhere. The system thrives on flexibility, redundancy, and the willingness to absorb losses as the cost of doing business. And yet, despite all this sophistication, the core logic remains brutally simple. The demand exists. The profits are immense. As long as a kilogram of cocaine can multiply its value dozens of times between source and street, innovation will follow. Every advance by authorities forces a response, and every response invites further scrutiny. It is an endless feedback loop, tightening and stretching across continents, oceans, and borders that exist mostly on maps. From fruit crates to fiber optic tunnels, from fishing boats to semi-submersibles, from whispered deals to encrypted networks, the evolution of cartel smuggling tells a larger story about globalization itself. The same forces that move goods, data, and capital around the world also move contraband. The difference lies not in the tools, but in the intent. And somewhere, even now, while patrols scan the horizon and analysts watch glowing screens, a new method is being tested quietly, cheaply, and without fanfare. If it works, it will spread. If it fails, it will vanish without a trace. The ocean will remain, the routes will shift, and the game, as it always has, will continue. Please click the cards on the screen now for more interesting videos.